I'm going to be in a off to the side because Peter is here and we're going to be able to see some of y'all, and he'll be able to see me from the front and the back simultaneously. Lucky God. All right. Now, Thakur was talking last week about Satchitananda and how God appears to the devotees through the cooling influence of devotion. That it's our devotion that freezes the formless into a form, like ice in the ocean, and that it's our devotion that gives God form, and that God takes that form simply really to provide us a handle to grab hold of, to get to know her and to interact and to learn these truths from the divine. And so I'm going to read that last paragraph that we read because it'll be interesting to connect with what he says tonight, which is quite fascinating. Do you know what I mean? Satchitananda is like an infinite ocean. Intense cold freezes the water into ice, which floats on the ocean in blocks of various forms. Likewise, through the cooling influence of bhakti, one sees forms of God in the ocean of the Absolute. These forms are meant for the bhaktas, the lovers of God. But when the sun of knowledge rises, the ice melts. It becomes the same water it was before. Water above and water below, everywhere, nothing but water. Therefore, a prayer in the Bhagavata says, O Lord, thou hast form, and thou art formless. Thou walkest before us, O Lord, in the shape of a man, and again, thou hast been described in the Vedas as beyond words and thought. So this is that notion that God is both with form and without form, and that God appears to you. The theory that I've sort of developed in my own little head around it is that God appears to you as your highest ideal of love. Whatever that is, God appears to you in that way. And you freeze him into form. You take him out of the formless and give him a form as your beloved. Now, the interesting thing is this next paragraph / sentence. Listen to this. This is something, I don't know, you may be like, what? But to me, I was floored, and I had to spend a few days rearranging some of the ideas in my mind because of this one verse. Listen to this. But you may say that for certain devotees, God assumes eternal forms. There are places in the ocean where the ice does not melt at all. It assumes the form of quartz, as it were. Do you see why that's an astounding statement? Because we're told in other parts of the Vedas, the general theory is that this universe, collapses into its pure absolute form, and then explodes again into the play, and then goes back. That's a yuga, and then it comes back again, and then it's redone again. And there's even some talk that each time it's the same, that you and I, that we have been in this exact duplicated situation before, that every time God explodes and becomes the universe, by whatever force that happens, that we're all here, and we play the same role, the same unfolding, the same loop, as it were. But that gets all undone with what Thakur just said, because Thakur is saying that there are places in the ocean where the ice never melts, where God keeps form forever. And you know what that does? That creates the possibility of an eternal heaven for the Christians. That creates an eternal loka where you can be with your chosen ideal forever. So the idea of heaven in Vedanta has always been presented as kind of a temporary state where you go there until your karma gets worn out and you don't have enough good karma to pay your bills anymore. So then you get hurled down to the earth again to work out your karmas again, and hopefully either transcend altogether or find your way back to heaven again. But here's a little shim that Thakur has thrown into the pudding that says, no, there are places in this infinite ocean where the ice never melts, where God maintains the form of the devotee's love that he has taken for those devotees, and turns into quartz, becomes stone, as it were, meaning he can't melt anymore. That is, and that it's eternal, that it's an eternal form. And I think that's so beautiful. But that is what makes me suspect that the afterlife isn't the same for everybody. That in as much as we create our own world and universe in our mind for the experience that we're in right now, that same mind, that same can in fact, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but that same mind can create a universe in which the chosen ideal never disappears, never melts, an eternal form of God, an eternal heaven, an eternal enjoyment. And so, earlier on, myself and Peter, we were talking about the idea of reincarnation, and is it true or not true? And I'm honest about it with myself, and the fact that I can't really say. I don't know. I haven't been there yet, or don't remember being there anyway. So I don't know. And the interesting thing to me is that when Thakur is asked directly about reincarnation, is reincarnation true in the gospel, his answer is a very odd one. He says, oh, many people have said that's true. That's his answer. You can't get a more non-committal answer than that. It's like, come on, Thakur. That's a politician's answer to that question. Well, some people have said so. So, it's not all as fixed as we are sometimes happy to declare. That even these philosophically spiritual truths that we have, even those we should not be dogmatic about. And we shouldn't go around saying this is the way it is. Because if there is one thing, yes, Sarah.
Swami, this goes into Ramakrishna's upbringing, and it ties in more with what Ramanuja was talking about, because wasn't Ramakrishna's family practitioners believed in Vishnu?
Mm-hmm.
So doesn't that sort of tie into this? I mean, ties into what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, it can. It can. It definitely creates an argument for. Well, you don't need arguments, because Ramakrishna says that all three of those states are true. That duality, qualified non-dualism, and non-dualism are all true, depending on where you're standing and looking. But this does say that duality is just as eternal as Advaita.
Yeah, so they're on an equal footing.
Yeah. That argument could be made. Now, I'm not making it.
No.
For obvious reasons, who am I to make that argument? But certainly this verse presents some very interesting notions about, I'm going to have to turn this a little bit more. This camera is doing weird things. There we go. Now it's still doing it. But so this very odd, what's going on here? So
yeah, it's interesting. It's pulsating a little bit.
Yeah,
it's like it's
definitely misbehaving, making me very uncomfortable.
Ooh, look at that. Yeah. Uh-oh.
All right. This is our class tonight. We're going to just watch Swami's camera misbehave here. Let me do this. And then this. Okay. Oh, now you're looking at me through finger grease. All right, super. All right, so you may say that for certain devotees, God assumes eternal forms. There are places in the ocean where the ice doesn't melt at all. It assumes the form of quartz. Then Kedar comes in and says, It is said in the Bhagavata that Vyasa asked God's forgiveness for his 3 transgressions. He said, O Lord, you are formless, but I have thought of you in my meditation as endowed with form. You are beyond speech, but I have sung you hymns. You are the all-pervading spirit, but I have made pilgrimages to sacred places. Be gracious, O Lord, and forgive these 3 transgressions of mine. Master, yes, God has form, and he is formless too. Further, he is beyond both form and formlessness. No one can limit him. All right, and this, I think, is the real message here. This, to me, is the real message. It's that God is not as big as your opinion. God is infinite. God is not confined by any description in any scripture. God is not held to a particular form or a particular manifestation. God is all and beyond. There's always that extra little and beyond. It's a tail, a little little tail that gets added to the mouse of God every time we talk about it. That there's always, yes, God is this and that, always more. And so in this helps us to resist our dogmatism, to resist our that smug self-righteousness that religious people often like to wear around as a little button on their lapel. You know, I'm right, and I'll tell you, just ask me a question and I'll teach you the truth. And no, nobody can get away with that. God is bigger than all truth. He is the summation of all truth, and he will play with it as she likes. There is no limit to the divine. So don't use that to give yourself license, though. Don't think, oh, good, that means God's going to make room for my ideas because he can be anything. That's like, all right, well, you know, if you have faith in that, go for it. But don't be surprised if that stove burns your fingers a little bit, right? But always know that God is big enough, and that the love you expect to find from God is infinite. You know, it's one of my favorite things. I know I bring these things up over and over, but I'm happy with them. So one of the things that I love to think about is this statement by Brahmananda, where he tells you that that spiritual life begins at Nirvikalpa Samadhi. All right. So from that's saying that our highest possible conception of the experience of God, the highest one that we can even put a name on and still not understand it, but at least point at it. He says that state, which only 5 people out of 7 billion are going to reach this century. Don't quote me on that. But that is this very small number of people actually ever are able to attain that incredible state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And yet Swami Brahmananda says that it's the beginning of spiritual life. And that really threw me for a loop when I first read that. I was like, wow, what must God be that would be the beginning of anything? It's like, what must God be? And I really thought and sat with that for a while, just trying to expand my mind around it. And my favorite idea that came out of that thinking was the notion that you will fall in love with God forever and still find more to fall in love with forever. That's the nature of divine love. You will never know God completely because God cannot be known. But the love that you have for her will continually increase forever. That to me was the message of this notion, of God being more than what we can conceive of, having no limit, having no boundary, no end, and being of the nature of pure love and pure wisdom. So you could say the same about his wisdom. God will entertain you and startle you and amaze you forever with just one new truth after another, one one demonstration of the manifestation after another forever. And so in that kind of description of God, where is smallness? Where is pettiness? You know, where are these dogmatic statements of how he is? Master, yes, God has form, and he is formless too. Further, he's beyond both of those, form and formlessness. No one can limit him. Rakal's father was sitting in the room. At that time, Rakal was staying with the master. After his mother's death, his father had married a second time. Now and then he came to Dakshineshwar because of Rakal's being there. He did not raise much objection to his son's living with the master. Being a wealthy man of the world, he was always involved in litigation. There were lawyers and deputy magistrates among Sri Ramakrishna's visitors. Rakal's father found it profitable to cultivate their acquaintance, since he expected to be benefited by their counsel in worldly matters. Now and then the master cast a glance at Rakal's father. It was his cherished desire that Rakal should live with him permanently at Dakshineshwar. The master, to Rakal's father and the devotees, "Ah, what a nice character Rakal has developed. Look at his face, and every now and then you will notice his lips moving. Inwardly he repeats the name of God, and so his lips move. Youngsters like him, they belong to a class of the ever perfect. They are born with God consciousness. No sooner do they grow a little older than they realize the danger of coming in contact with the world. There is the parable of the Homa bird in the Vedas. The bird lives high up in the sky and never descends to the earth. It lays its eggs in the sky, and the egg begins to fall. But the bird lives in such a high region that the egg hatches while it's falling. The fledgling comes out and continues to fall, but it is still so high that while falling it grows wings and its eyes open. Then the young bird perceives that it is dashing down toward the earth and will be instantly killed. The moment it sees the ground, it turns and shoots up toward its mother in the sky. Then its one goal is to reach its mother. Youngsters like Rakal are like that bird. From their very childhood, they are afraid of the world, and their one thought is how to reach the mother, how to realize God. You may ask, how is it possible for these boys, born of worldly parents and living among the worldly minded, to develop such knowledge and devotion? It can be explained. If a pea falls into a heap of dung, it germinates into a pea plant nonetheless. The peas that grow on the plant serve many useful purposes. Because it was sown in dung, it will produce another kind of plant. Ah, what a sweet nature Rakal has nowadays. And why shouldn't it be so? If the yam is a good one, its shoots also become good. Everyone laughs. Like father, like son. So of course, it's amazing to read about Rakal and think, what is it to be pure at this level from the very birth, and to be only concerned about realization from the beginning of life until the end? What a beautiful notion that is. What an amazing notion that is. To have no interest in those things. But the beautiful here is that all of us have a pea inside. That pea is the image of God that forms our creation, that gives us our power to exist, our power to think, our power to grow, our power to express and manifest. And that comes from an image of the beloved, of the divine. And so, no matter what you think of yourself at any given moment, always know that the potential of God is what you are. That regardless of your manifestation today, regardless of your experience of your mind today, regardless of what your attachments are and your ideas of who you are and what you are today, you're going to grow into the divine. You're going to manifest as the pea plant at some point. It's inevitable. It's yours already. You are an heir. You are not a beggar. And so, what a wonderful thing to remember, even in your worst moment, to just realize, wait, I'm going to throw this story out. I'm just going to dump it out right now. And in this moment, I'm going to enjoy being a pea. In this moment, I'm going to remember that it's inevitable that I will reach the beloved, that it's inevitable that I will be free. Aside to Garindra, how well he has explained God with and without form. Do the Vaishnavas believe only in God with form? Garindra, perhaps so. They are one-sided. Did you understand what he meant by the eternal form of God? That quartz? I couldn't grasp that very well. The master to M. Well, what are you talking about? M and Garindra smiled and remained silent. Later in the afternoon, the devotees were singing in the Panchavati, where the master joined them. Now, here's a good lesson. When the teacher asks if you have a question, just remember, if you just smile and don't have a question, then none of us are ever going to learn the truth about the problem that you needed resolved. And you see what our friends Garindra and M have done to us here? They had the opportunity to invoke an explanation about this timeless form of God, this quartz that never melts. They had an option to get Thakur to explain it himself. But in this, this meek, this meek humility of like, oh, no, nothing, everything is fine, thank you, that we are now denied. We are not going to get this description from Thakur at this point. Maybe at another point he'll give it to us. So what I'm saying is, when you have an opportunity to ask questions, if you have a question, ask it. If there's something that's confusing to you and you have the opportunity to ask it. None of us has a unique ignorance. All of us together are running around, bumping into walls, stubbing our toes, banging our knees on the dirt, hitting the corner of the coffee table. It's life. It's life. So ask your questions and ask them boldly. And if you don't get a full enough answer, ask them again and ask them again. Right? And, if you're afraid somebody's going to laugh at your question, then laugh at it first. And what's the harm? Just go on. Later in the afternoon, the devotees were singing in the Panchavati, where the master joined them. They sang together in praise of the Divine Mother. High in the heaven of the mother's feet, my mind was soaring like a kite. When came the blast of sin's rough wind that drove it swiftly toward the earth, Maya disturbed its even flight by bearing down upon one side, and I could make it rise no more. Entangled in the twisting string of love for children and for wife, alas, my kite has rent in twain. It lost its crest of wisdom soon, and downward plunged as I let it go. How could it hope to fly again when all its top was torn away? Though fastened with devotion's cord, it came to grief in playing here. Its 6 opponents worsted it. Now Naresh Chandra rues this game of smiles and tears and thinks it better to never have played at all. I'd like to go back and look at each of these verses, because each one of them uncovers some interesting things. Well, high in the heaven of the mother's feet, my mind was soaring like a kite. This one's kind of funny to me, in a sense, because it plays into what we were just talking about. You know, to us, heaven is the highest achievement, but it's the heaven of mother's feet, meaning she's standing on heaven, which means there's a whole lot more beyond heaven and the experience of the divine than the heaven that's just her feet, you know, just the beginning of God. So this kind of falls into that Brahmananda statement as well. But it's the highest that your mind can soar. It's the highest that you can reach in this with this material form. When came the blast of sin's rough wind that drove it swiftly toward the earth. You know, what is sin? That sin is attachment, right? Sin is assigning an untrue thing to the qualities of God, right? And so it's identifying with body and mind and then making decisions based on that particular, making decisions that serve the particular and neglect the whole. And so things like lust and greed, if we allow them into the mind, what happens? It drives us swiftly down, which means our mind is not able to soar. You know, the reason that the scriptures list out, you know, all of these sins and talks about them in such an adamant form is not because the thing in itself has any importance at all, but its effect on you as a spiritual being is detrimental and painful, and it will prevent you from touching the beautiful bliss of your nature. It will stop you from being able to indulge and swim and enjoy the infinite wisdom of your being. It will rob you from that because you won't be able to soar. You won't be able to be free of the body and the mind and the smallness that it entails, that it causes in us. And so a lustful mind is considered impure, not because lust is one thing or another, and not because sex is anything this or that, but because it requires an absolute identity with the material. And if you're identified with the material, you can't fly, you can't expand, you can't be free. And so here he's saying that the sin's rough wind that drove it swiftly toward the earth, it'll bring you right smack down into material. You won't be able to go beyond. This is why we discipline ourselves. This is why we purify ourselves. This is why we try and control the urges of the body and mind. Maya disturbed its even flight by bearing down upon one side, and I could make it rise no more. So what does that mean? Maya, when you become identified with the body and mind, you're going to get out of balance because you're no longer starting from a true point. You're no longer coming from the point, I'm ever free, ever pure, ever beloved of God, immortal, never born, never died. Instead, you're coming from, I'm a man who's aging and I'm fat and I'm growing old and I need money and I need pleasure and I want to travel and I'm going to go get a new car and I'm going to, it weights your self and puts you out of balance so that you can't fly a straight line. You can't find your way back to the heaven of mother's feet because you're now twisted out of shape. You, through your constant giving in to lust and greed and all of those notions of body and mind, you've come up now with a wrong idea of self. And all of your thinking is going to be tilted. All of your understanding is going to be tilted. And you're not going to be able to fly as well. So you see, at first, the inclination toward these unhelpful things brings us down. If it's just a one-time thing and you turn and you're like, oh, nope, not that, and you get right back to mother's feet, no problem. You get right back up there, you keep going. But if you make it a habit, if you come down and you'll notice, and I'm sure through your observation, you know that if you give in to your temptations or your weaknesses or however you want to phrase it, you know, I was born a Christian, so what can I do but phrase it that way? If you buy into that and you don't get back up to the heaven of mother's feet, but you indulge, and you know that once you've indulged, the next indulgence is presented immediately. Like that, there is no satisfaction. You have that one piece of cake. As soon as you finish that piece of cake, it's not enough. You're going to need another one. And if you've already given in today, and you've given in tomorrow, and you gave in last week, and you gave in the week before that, you've now got a habit. You've now got a freight train that you've got to stop. You've got to control. You've got to bring, you've got to stop this thing somehow. And you can't, because it's distorted your sense of self. You now actually believe that you wanted that piece of cake. You're no longer separating yourself from the idea of body and the idea of the senses. You're no longer understanding that those things have nothing to do with you. And so you're bound, and you're out of balance, and you're not going to be able to manifest yourself freely and purely. And you'll experience the smallness of your decisions. You'll experience the suffering of the particular. I could make it rise no more, entangled in the twisted string of love for children and for wife. Alas, my kite was rent in twain. Yeah, so you made choices and chased after the temporary, identifying yourself with the ever-changing, right? And so then we suffer from that. It lost its crest of wisdom soon. Yes, wisdom doesn't come from the notion of me and mine. Wisdom comes through a knowledge of the one without a second. That's how we understand the nature of the universe. That's how things resolve into their perfection. And downward plunged, I let it go. How could it hope to fly again when all its top was torn away? Though fastened with devotion's cord, it came to grief in playing here. Right? So this isn't just a worldly person. This is a devotee, who had some devotion, but decided to play, didn't take something very seriously, thought that something wasn't a big deal, thought that something wasn't that important, right? And flirted with it, played with it, and got trapped, got stuck, so we didn't realize God in this life because of it. Its 6 opponents worsted it. That's the 6 passions of the body, that pull us into these things. And we only get concerned about obeying the passions when we think that they're our passions. That's what attachment is. When we take a quality of the body as being a quality of ourself, that's attachment. So if the body has lust and we say, I'm lusting, you've lied, right? And immediately that takes me back to my other favorite saying that I repeat over and over and over again, is that you can only say 3 things that are true about yourself, right? Do you remember what they are? Of course you do. Satchitananda, I am loving. I am wise. And I exist. Those are the only 3 things you can say about yourself and not be deluded, right? If you say, I'm jealous, no, the mind is jealous. You are not jealous. I'm hungry. No, the body is hungry. You are not hungry. I'm angry. No, the mind is angry. You are not angry. You see, so this is what we're talking about. If you begin to attach any other attributes to the sense of I, other than those 3, that is what's happening in the first and second verse up there. That is what tilts your wing, Maya, standing on your wing and setting you off balance. The plunge from the heaven of mother's feet, the plunge that happens from that. This happens through this attachment where you take an attribute of body, mind, and you say, I. That's attachment. And that's what brings us down. That's what leads us into this, this ball of yarn called this world. Now Narishchandra rues this game of smiles and tears and thinks it better to have never played at all. Now there's a couple of ways you could look at that last verse. One, you could say, oh, he regrets that he ever came to this world and lived. Maybe. But it could also be that he comes to the realization at some point that he never played at all. Right? that we think we're playing. We think we're involved in this dream. We think that this is who I am, that this is my mission in life, and this is my body, blah, blah, blah. So we think that. But when we finally break, when we finally let go of the story, we realize that none of it ever really happened at all, just like a dream. It never was really there. And so ultimately, we come to that realization. Ultimately, we come to realize this was just an ever-changing manifestation of an eternal principle of love, wisdom, and existence. Nothing happened. It was just body heat from God. The singing continued, and Sri Ramakrishna danced with the devotees, and they sang, "The black bee of my mind is drawn in sheer delight to the blue lotus flower of Mother Shyama's feet." Indeed, that's why we enjoy these things so much. That's why we love to sing about God and think about the divine, and someday do our practice with that same kind of joy, that same kind of delight, because it resonates inside. The guitar strings of the rest of yourself hum along with the name of God, with the thought of love, with the thought of wisdom, with the thought of immortality. The blue flower of the feet of Kali, Shiva's consort, tasteless to the bee, are the blossoms of desire. My mother's feet are black, and black too is the bee. Black is made one with black. This much of the mystery my mortal eyes behold, then hastily retreat. But Kamalakanta's hopes are answered in the end. He swims in the sea of bliss, unmoved by joy or pain. So we're still swimming in this in this place, but we've withdrawn from mind and body, and we're swimming in our bliss, in the bliss of our existence, which is complete and whole in us right now. And as soon as we withdraw from the idea of being mind, as soon as we withdraw and set down the restlessness of being a body, then we become aware of the fact that we are bliss behind all that we are wise behind all of that, we are immortal behind all of that. The kirtan went on. "Oh, mother, what a machine is that you have made? What pranks you play with this toy 3.5 cubits high," meaning this body, this me as a person. What tricks you're playing on me? What pranks you're playing on me over and over, hiding yourself within. That the presence of the Divine Mother is hidden within you. And now you're running around looking for it. That's exactly the same thing as being on your phone and going around looking for it. I remember talking to somebody on the phone and they wanted to give me their address. And I was like, wait, let me put it in my phone. I literally got up and was looking around my room for my phone as I'm holding it to my face so that I can put their address in it. This is our condition. Mother's hiding. She's right there. She is you. She's within you. She is the love that you use to love everything that you love. She is the wisdom that inspires every thought that you have. And now we're looking for her. Now we're trying to do something to see her, to know her, when she's everything. She's everything you have and everything you are, everything you see, everything you imagine. What a machine is this that you've made. What pranks you play with this toy, 3.5 cubits high. Hiding yourself within, you hold the guiding string, but the machine, not knowing it, still believes it moves by itself. Whoever finds the mother remains a machine no more. Right. You are the puppeteer. You are not the puppet. Yet some machines have even bound the mother herself with the string of love. Right? So Thakur says that God is a little bit shy about giving out pure love because he says that God is enslaved by pure love. If you love God with pure love, he's your slave. It's a beautiful ideal. A beautiful ideal. It was a very happy day for all. The master, accompanied by M, was coming back to his room when he met Trilokya, a Brahmo devotee, on the way. Trilokya bowed before the master. Master, they are singing in the Panchavati. Why don't you go there? Trilokya, what will I do there? Master, why, you'll enjoy the music. Trilokya, oh, I've been there already. Master, well, that's good. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. The master was sitting with the devotees in the southeast veranda of his room. Master, a holy man who has renounced the world will, of course, chant the name of God. That is only natural. He has no other duties to perform. If he meditates on God, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. On the other hand, if he fails to think of God or to chant his holy name, then people will think ill of him. But it is a great deal to his credit if a householder utters the name of the Lord. Think of King Janaka. What courage he had, indeed. He fenced with two swords, the one of knowledge and the other of work. He possessed the perfect knowledge of Brahman and also was devoted to the duties of the world. An unchaste woman attends to the minutest duties of the world, but her mind is always dwelling on her paramour. The constant company of holy men is necessary. The holy man introduces one to God. Kedar, yes, sir. The great soul is born in the world for the redemption of humanity. He leads others to God, just as a locomotive engine takes along with it a long train of carriages. Or again, he's like the river or lake that quenches the thirst of many people. The devotees were ready to return home. One by one, they saluted the master. At the sight of Bhavanath, Sri Ramakrishna said, "Don't go away today. The very sight of you inspires me." Bhavanath had not yet entered into worldly life. A youth of 20, he had a fair complexion and handsome features. He shed tears of joy on hearing the name of God. The master looked on him as the very embodiment of Narayana. Thursday, March 29th, 1883. The master had taken a little rest after his noon meal when a few devotees arrived from Calcutta, among them Amrita and a well-known singer of the Brahmo Samaj, Trilokya. Rakal was not feeling well. The master was greatly worried about him and said to the devotees, "You see, Rakal is not well. Will soda water help him? What am I to do now? Rakal, please take some prasad from the Jagannath temple." Even as he spoke these words, the master underwent a strange transformation. He looked at Rakal with the infinite tenderness of a mother and affectionately uttered the name of Govinda. Did he see in Rakal the manifestation of God himself? The disciple was a young boy of pure heart who had renounced all attraction to lust and greed. And Sri Ramakrishna was intoxicated day and night with the love of God. At the sight of Rakal, his eyes expressed the tender feelings of a mother, a love like that which filled the heart of Mother Yashoda in the sight of baby Krishna. The devotees gazed at the master in wonder as he went into a deep samadhi. As his soul soared into the realm of divine consciousness, his body became motionless, his eyes were fixed on the tip of his nose, and his breathing almost ceased. An unknown Bengali, dressed in the ochre cloth of a monk, entered the room and sat on the floor. The master's mind was coming down to the ordinary plane of consciousness. Presently he began to talk, though the spell of samadhi still lingered. Master, at the sight of the ochre cloth, why this Garawa? Should one put on such a thing for mere fancy? A man once said, "I have exchanged the chandi for a drum." At first, he used to sing the holy songs of the Chandi. Now he beats the drum. There are 3 or 4 varieties of renunciation. Afflicted with miseries at home, one may put on the ochre cloth of a monk, but that renunciation doesn't last long. Again, a man out of work puts on the ochre-wearing cloth and goes off to Benares. After 3 months, he writes home, "Hey, I have a job here. I shall come home in a few days. Don't worry about me." Again, a man may have everything he wants. He lacks nothing, yet he does not enjoy his possessions. He weeps for God alone. That is real renunciation. No lie of any sort is good. A false garb, even though a holy one, is not good. If the outer garb does not correspond to the inner thought, it gradually brings ruin. Uttering false words or doing false deeds, one gradually loses all fear. Far better is the white cloth of a householder, attachment to worldliness, occasional lapses from the ideal, and an outer garb of Garawa. How dreadful. Wow. The ideal is perfect and beautiful and terrifying. Terrifyingly beautiful. This is an important thing, though. He says, uttering false words or doing false deeds, one gradually loses all fear. You know, that fear is that respect. It's like one loses, how to say that? It's like you don't think it's that bad. You know, if you once you've crossed a line, it's simply that much easier to cross it the second time. And if you cross it a third time and a fourth time, you've lost all respect for that line. You no longer think it's an issue, you see? And this is very dangerous in our life, because this is how our kite gets tilted. And this is how we start losing altitude, is that we begin to accept things that we associate with our personality. Oh, you know, what to do. I'm just that way. You know, oh, what to do. That's the way I am. You know, oh, God and I, we're like this. She knows me. Yeah, she doesn't mind that. We've got that worked out. You see, and we don't take it seriously, and we slowly compromise. You know, until we're sleeping until 10 a.m. and whatever. You see what happens, though. You lower your standards through your mistakes. And so that's why we have to have that absolute renunciation. That's why it's so important to make that one great statement of renunciation and be done. You know, he says what's happening here, you know, when he says attachments to worldliness, occasional lapses from the ideal, and an outer garb of Garawa. How dreadful. How dreadful. And what's dreadful about it? Hypocrisy is dreadful about it. And why is that dreadful? Because it breaks your strand of truth. It breaks your power inside. You know, anytime you say something to someone, you're always going to know that it's not truth. You know, that you've compromised. That you can't say that with the same conviction. That's why the words of a Jesus or of a Ramakrishna or of a Vivekananda or Holy Mother, that's why their words change worlds. It's because they're in complete alignment with what they are all the way down. There is no forked tongue in them. When they say something, it comes from their center, from their soul. And when you hear it, you know where it came from, and you are changed by it. Someone who's not true to their word, someone who is a hypocrite in the way that they're living their life, cannot be of much help to another. Right? That's what Thakur says. You know, you want to bring all these people across the ocean, and you can't even keep yourself afloat. You know, Don't have a wrong opinion of yourself through compromise, right? Accept that you haven't reached the ideal. That's all right as a working ideal, but don't stop the ideal. Don't lower the ideal. Keep it where it is. Admit that you're not making it. Admit that you're compromising, that you're falling short, and work where you are. But don't stop comparing yourself to the ideal. Always keep the highest in mind and always expect the highest of yourself. And go forward, clothed in grace, giving it no other thought than your earnest and truthful desire to know God. It is not proper for a righteous person to tell a lie or to do something false, even in a dramatic performance. Once I went to Keshav's house to see the performance of a play called the Nava Vrindavan. They brought something on the stage which they called the cross. Another actor sprinkled water, which they said was the water of peace. I saw a third actor staggering and reeling in the role of a drunkard. A Brahmo devotee. Oh, that was K. Master, it is not good for a devotee to play such parts. It is bad for the mind to dwell on such subjects for a long while. The mind is like white linen, fresh from the laundry. It takes the color in which you dip it. If it is associated with falsehood for a long time, it will be stained with falsehood. Another day, I went to Keshav's house to see the play called Nimai Sannyas. Some flattering disciples of Keshav spoiled the whole performance. One of them said to Keshav, "You are the Chaitanya of the Kali Yuga." Keshav pointed to me and asked with a smile, "Then who is he?" I replied, "I am the servant of your servant. I am the speck of the dust of your feet." Keshav had a desire for name and fame. To Amrita and Trilokya. Youngsters like Narendra and Rakal are ever perfect. Every time they are born, they are devoted to God. An ordinary man acquires a little devotion after austerities and a hard struggle. But these boys, they have love of God from the very moment of their birth. They are like the natural image of Shiva, which springs forth from the earth and is not set up by human hands. The ever-perfect form, a class by themselves. Not all birds have crooked beaks. The ever-perfect are never attached to the world. There is the instance of Prahlada. Ordinary people practice spiritual discipline and cultivate devotion to God, but they also become attached to the world and are caught in the glamour of woman and gold. They are like flies, which sit on a flower, a sweetmeat, or on filth as well. But the ever-perfect are like bees, which light only on flowers and sip the honey. The ever-perfect drink only the nectar of divine bliss. They are never inclined to worldly pleasure. The devotion of the ever-perfect is not like the ordinary devotion, but one acquires as a result of strenuous spiritual discipline. Ritualistic devotion consists in repeating the name of God and performing worship in a prescribed manner. It is like the crossing of a rice field in a roundabout way. It is like crossing a rice field in a roundabout way along the bulk. Again, it is like reaching a nearby village by boat in a roundabout way along a winding river. One does not follow the injunctions of ceremonial worship when one develops raga bhakti, but one loves God as one's own. Then it is like crossing a rice field after the harvest. You don't have to walk along the bulk. You can go straight across the field in any direction. When the country is flooded deep with water, one doesn't have to follow the winding river. Then the fields are deep underwater. You can row your boat straight to the village. Without this intense attachment, this passionate love, one cannot realize God. Amrita. Sir, how do you feel in samadhi? Master. You may have heard that the cockroach by intently meditating on the Brahmara, is transformed into a Brahmara. Do you know how I feel then? I feel like a fish that has been released from a pot into the water of the Ganges. Amrita, don't you feel at that time even a trace of ego? Master, yeah, generally a little of it remains. However hard you may rub a grain of gold against a grindstone, still a bit of it always remains. Or again, take the case of a big fire. The ego is like one of its sparks. In samadhi, I lose outer consciousness completely, but God generally keeps a little trace of ego in me for the enjoyment of the divine communion. Enjoyment is possible only when I and you remain. Again, sometimes God effaces even the trace of I. Then one experiences Jada Samadhi or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That experience cannot be described. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean, but before it had gone far into the water, it melted away. It became entirely one with the depth of the ocean. Then who was there to come back and to tell us about the ocean's depth? All right. End of the chapter. A perfect place to pause until next week.